Lando Norris is the newest and latest Formula One world champion, something that he and his family have worked so hard for his whole life. But his team McLaren went about racing and the Drivers' World Championship in a way that we've never ever seen before. And I don't know about you, but I can't help but feel that 2025's title was just a bit unsensational. I feel awful saying that. But on Lando personally, the way he clinched his maiden title was incredibly impressive and has done so not like many other champions I can remember before him. And that's a good thing for the sport, because all the people that might look up to him and want to get into this sport will see him as a different kind of hero to maybe the previous drivers that have gone before. So I want to get into all this and why we might not see another championship or season like this for some time. Let's get into it. First things first, I want to make very clear that becoming a Formula One world champion is extremely special and the hardest thing to do in motorsport. But last season was so here and there, and it didn't feel like there was momentum in this time of the season or that time of the season. It didn't really feel like, in the end, a really supreme victory like we've maybe come to know. Maybe we have 2021 and prior years to blame for being spoiled for choice with the quality of the racing on display and maybe sort of the stardom of a particular driver and how dominant they've been with world championships. But it was a completely different kettle of fish in 2025. However, one man came out on top in the end and he fully deserves his stripes. Lando Norris. Yes, it wasn't pure dominance. No, it just wasn't a one-team battle at some stages, but it certainly kept you guessing of where things were going. Starting the year as he meant to go on, Lando put down a marker at the first race in Australia. His teammate Oscar over 20 seconds behind, but that was the last of such a gap that we would see. Oscar having strong streaks throughout Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Miami. For a hat-trick of wins, he was looking ominous, and at one point looked like he was going to run away with the title for McLaren and that side of the garage. But as we went through the rest of the season and Max Verstappen wanted a piece of the action, Lando kept Oscar honest through some fantastic performances. There were times where Lando really showed what he was capable of, given the right car performance underneath him, a cool head, and where the circumstances allowed him to be on top of his McLaren and actually on top of his own head, on top of his thoughts that he could do it. McLaren enjoyed the first part of the year not really having to worry about Red Bull or Max in their wake because they didn't really have a car to compete, especially in the run-up to the summer break, and especially with the departure of Christian Horner and the sort of unsettled morale and the workflow within the team. At least that's what it looked like from the outside at the time. Max was commended though and given credit where it's due for taking victory around Suzuka in a car that was absolutely nowhere in practice and really didn't seem like a front runner at that stage of the season, early on in the season, and he somehow managed to wring the neck of that RB21 and put it on the top step of the podium. But then became a two-horse race that many had been eyeing up, but not in the way that we expected. Papaya rules once again in 2025 came into the fold, none more so than at Monza at the Italian Grand Prix. Lando had a bad pit stop on lap 47 and it put him out of sync with the running order of the race to get Lando back out in P2 and for Oscar and him to either fight it out properly or not have the headache of going through all that commotion, asking to swap positions and make it what they did plan in the first place. Yeah. This was a bad look for McLaren, which proved many people's opinions that Papaya Rules was, well and truly still alive, and that they do whatever it took to keep Lando in front at that point and ahead, picking up more points than he would have done previously. And Lando was quite lucky to have results on his side, if you think about it, with a bit of inconsistency in other parts of the season, and sometimes situations he'd, bring upon himself. But the key thing about Lando's season and him coming out on top was that he was there when it mattered and struck when it counted and had the opportunity to do so. On his day, there was no standing in his way. Even if he was getting P2 and picking up some valuable points in other races that he wasn't winning all the Grand Prix throughout 2025, there was a consistent enough approach to build up his points tally for the final race of the season. A huge statement was him laying down that marker in Monaco and claiming his maiden victory around the Principality. Narrow walls, zero room for error, and having that mindset not to doubt himself, was a massive credit to his ability and moments of ability and pedigree coming together and shining through. When we got into the lower grip tracks towards the end of the season in 2025, Lando also made it count where it mattered and sustaining that pressure at the front. Mexico was a great victory on top of Brazil as well, adding to his tally earlier on in the season at a time where it really counted. Las Vegas was somewhat unfortunate and very awkward for a McLaren team, a double disqualification which really didn't help them at that stage of the season, a crucial time where they pretty much thought they had the title in the bag for one of their drivers at least, and well, particularly Lando. They had to make it harder for themselves, didn't they? But being where he needed to be and doing just enough was what ultimately led to the odds swinging in his favour. And then you come to Qatar, where it was a mixed race. Although Verstappen was dominating, there was no catching him, and the McLaren tried to do a different strategy, and that really hampered their race, and particularly Lando's race. However, somehow he managed to get in front of Kimi Antonelli in the final couple of laps, and that gave him the couple of extra points that he did need vitally towards the end of the season. And then we get to the final race in Abu Dhabi between Verstappen, Piastri and Norris in what situation seemed just unthinkable maybe a few races before that, where Max had clawed his way back, had been driving the wheels off of his Red Bull to be in contention with a 5th world title. And it was not plain sailing for Lando either, falling behind Oscar in the race at the start. He had better pace, and when Lando pitted, a crucial moment was dealing with the midfield traffic when he came out again and getting in front of him, and getting in front of a precariously swerving Yuki Tsunoda. Thankfully though, all was fine and he got past, albeit on the edge, with Tsunoda actually getting a 5-second penalty for really pushing things to the limit of, well, fair racing. So Norris finishing in P3 sealed the World Championship, and enough consistency through the season was enough to secure his first World Championship and became the 35th World Champion in Formula 1. And look, it wasn't glossy, it wasn't the all singing, all dancing fireworks of claiming P1, but he got it done. And it didn't matter at the end of the day because he won by 2 points, and that's all that matters at the end. And this is it really. When you think about the typical world champions that have gone before us and the way they go about their business, you think about Sebastian Vettel, you think about Michael Schumacher, you think about Verstappen, you think about Lewis Hamilton, specifically in those Rosberg eras as well, to come on top of his teammate. The way Lando did this was unlike any champion that I think I've ever seen before, and since I've been following the sport, I don't know about you, there was no sort of Verstappen-like ruthlessness of the years before. There was McLaren managing things evenly, and the scales were rarely tipped in either direction, and there was the way that Norris could nutted himself. We all know that Lando had been hard on himself throughout his career, and many people doubting whether he had the psychology to be a Formula 1 world champion. But he's shown to the kids growing up now with dreams of becoming a Formula 1 driver, maybe just getting into any form of motorsport, that you can do it with humility, you can do it with openness, you can do it with honesty in a manner that you rarely ever see in a World Championship victory. And that's why the 2025 season to some people may have seemed underwhelming, me included. Towards the end it just didn't feel like all the seasons we'd come to used to knowing before. Maybe not the grandeur or the sparkle of previous champions, or the scandal that comes with a champion getting his elbows out, but at the end of the day, Lando Norris won't mind. He's a Formula 1 world champion. Were they lucky that other teams weren't firing on all cylinders and they had the gap that they did? Probably yes, but they redefined how you go about winning a world title in a different way, morally, you could say. And the 2025 season might be the only opportunity and conditions a team will get like that to do it in that way ever again. So here comes the awful but expected questioning of whether Lando's just a one-trick pony. Can he do it again? Can he pick up a few titles under his belt like his previous champions and British champions beforehand? Can he go into the history books a little bit more? Well, some people will be asking that. Is this just a ticking off of his childhood dream, or is he a little bit more than just a one-trick pony? I love that phrase, one-trick pony. Who came up with that? Well, moving into a new set of regulations in 2026, as we know, it seems hard to think that unless McLaren have obviously got the jump on the whole field like they have the last couple of seasons in some way in the early stages, that they'll be able to play it in the same way, have the infamous papaya rules dictate the rules of engagement going forward in this new season. And with such a big shift in the regulations to a new formula, everyone knows that you'd be a fool to write off any team in this new era of Formula 1. Even teams that might not have been around for too long, or the outfits that have remained somewhat in the shadows and are starting to get their act together now, it's not really a risk that McLaren can take and approach probably going into this new season. Or the underachievers of years gone by and the teams actually getting their act together, people like Ferrari, you could say. I dare to say, maybe people like Alpine. I'm sure Lando would love nothing more than to restore and retain the success of his maiden title victory that he's accomplished in 2025. But he and McLaren must know that to be on the grid in the same way and their papaya rules play out in real time, other teams will be wiser to McLaren being like that again. So how do you think Lando will go about racing in 2026? Do you think McLaren are going to have the metal and the components, the tools to take on a brand new era of Formula 1 and be right there at the front of the grid where they were last season? Let me know in the comments below. We can continue this chat in there, and I'm so looking forward to a 2026 season to make more videos like this. I pledge to be more consistent as well, and I'll have a competition coming for you to get your hands on something pretty cool in a couple of videos time. So stick around and subscribe, like if you did enjoy this video, and you know what to do. I'll catch you in the next one.